Metamorphoses, Book the 11th, by Ovid, written 1 ACE, translated by Sir Samuel Garth, John Dryden, et al. The Death of Orpheus. Here, while the Thracian bard's enchanting strain soothes beasts and woods and all the listening plain, the female bacchanals devoutly mad in shaggy skins like savage creatures clad, warbling in air, perceived his lovely lay, and from a rising ground beheld him play. When one, the wildest, with dishevelled hair, that loosely streamed and ruffled in the air, soon as her frantic eye the lyrist spied, "See, see, the hater of our sex!" she cried. Then at his face her missive javelin sent, which whizzed along, and brushed him as it went. But the soft wreaths of ivy twisted around prevent a deep impression of the wound. Another for a weapon hurls a stone, which, by the sound subdued as soon as thrown, falls at his feet with a seeming sense, implores his pardon for its late offence. But now their frantic rage unbounded grows, turns all to madness, and no measure knows. Yet this the charms of music might subdue, but that with all its charms is conquered too. In louder strains their hideous yellings rise, and squeaking hornpipes echo through the skies, which, in hoarse consort with the drum, confound the moving lyre and every gentle sound. Then 'twas the deafened stones flew on with speed, and saw unsoothed their tuneful poet bleed. The birds, the beasts, and all the savage crew, which the sweet lyrist to attention drew, now by the female mob's more furious rage, are driven and forced to quit the shady stage. Next their fierce hands the bard himself assail, nor can his song against their wrath prevail. They flock like birds when in a clustering flight. By day they chase the boding fowl of night. So crowded amphitheatres survey their stag, to greedy dogs a future prey. Their steely javelins, which soft curls entwine of budding tendrils from the leafy vine, for sacred rites of mild religion made, are flung promiscuous at the poet's head. Those clods of earth or flints discharge, and these hurl prickly branches slivered from the trees, and lest their passion should be unsupplied, the rabbled crew by chance at distance spied, where oxen, straining at the heavy yoke, the fallowed field with slow advances broke. Nigh which the brawny peasants dug the soil, procuring food with long laborious toil. These, when they saw the ranting throng draw near, quitted their tools and fled, possessed with fear. Long spades and rakes of mighty size were found, carelessly left upon the broken ground. With these the furious lunatics engage, and first the labouring oxen feel their rage. Then to the poet they return with speed, whose fate was past prevention now decreed. In vain he lifts his suppliant hands, in vain he tries before his never-failing strain, and from those sacred lips, whose thrilling sound fierce tigers and insensate rocks could wound. Ah, gods, how moving was the mournful sight, to see the fleeting soul now take its flight. Thee the soft warblers of the feathered kind bewailed, for thee thy savage audience pined. Those rocks and woods that oft thy strain had led mourn for their charmer, and lament him dead. And drooping trees their leafy glories shed. Naiads and dryads with dishevelled hair promiscuous weep, and scarves of sable wear. Nor could the river gods conceal their moan, but with new floods of tears augment their own. His mangled limbs lay scattered all around. His head and harp a better fortune found. In Hebrus' streams they gently rolled along, and soothed the waters with a mournful song. Soft deadly notes the lifeless tongue inspire. A doleful tune sounds from the floating lyre. The hollows banks in solemn consort mourn, and the sad strain in echoing groans return. Now, with the current to the sea they glide, borne by the billows of the briny tide, and driven where waves round rocky Lesbos roar. They strand and lodge upon Methymna's shore. But here, when landed on the foreign soil, a venom snake, the product of the isle, attempts the head, and sacred locks imbrued with clotted gore and still fresh dropping blood. Phoebus at last his kind protection gives, and from the fact the greedy monster drives, whose marble jaws his impious crime atone, still grinning ghastly, though transformed to stone. His ghost flies downward to the Stygian shore, and knows the places it had been before. Among the shadows of the pious train he finds Eurydice, and loves again. With pleasure views the beauteous phantom's charms, and clasps her in his unsubstantial arms. There, side by side, they unmolested walk, or pass their blissful hours in pleasing talk. Aft or before the bard securely goes, and without danger can review his spouse. The Thracian woman transformed to trees. Bacchus, resolved to revenge the wrong of Orpheus murdered on the madding throng, decreed that each accomplice dame should stand fixed by the roots along the conscious land. Their wicked feet, that late so nimbly ran to wreak their malice on the guiltless man, sudden with twisted ligatures were bound, like trees, deeply planted in the turfy ground. And as the fowler with his subtle gins his feathered captives by the feet entwines, that fluttering pant and struggle to get loose, yet only closer draw the fatal noose. So these were caught, and as they strove in vain to quit the place, they but increase their pain. They flounce and toil, yet find themselves controlled. The root, though pliant, toughly keeps its hold. In vain their toes and feet they look to find, for even their shapely legs are clothed with rind. One smites her thighs with a lamenting stroke, and finds the flesh transformed to solid oak. Another, with surprise and grief distressed, lays on above but beats a wooden breast. A rugged bark their softer necks invades, their branching arms shoot up delightful shades. At once they seem and are a real grove, with mossy trunks below and verdant leaves above. The fable of Midas. Nor this sufficed. The god's disgust remains, and he resolves to quit their hated plains. The vineyards of Timol engross his care, and with a better choir he fixes there, where the smooth streams of clear Pactolus rolled, then undistinguished for its sands of gold. The satyrs with the nymphs, his usual throng, come to salute their god, and jovial danced along. Silenus only missed, for a while he reeled, feeble with age and wine, about the field. The hoary drunkard had forgot his way, and to the Phrygian clowns became a prey, who to King Midas dragged the captive god, while on his tawny pate the wreaths of ivy nod. Midas from Orpheus had been taught his lore, and knew the rites of Bacchus long before. He, when he saw his venerable guest, in honor of the god ordained a feast. 10 days in course, with each continued night, were spent in genial mirth and brisk delight. Then, on the 11th, when with brighter ray Phosphor had chased the fading stars away, the king through Lydia's field young Bacchus sought, and to the god his foster father brought. Pleased with the welcome sight, he bids him soon but name his wish, and swears to grant the boon. A glorious offer, yet but ill bestowed on him whose choice so little judgment showed. Give me, says he, nor thought he asked too much, that with my body whatsoever I touch, changed from the nature which it held of old, may be converted into yellow gold. He had his wish, But yet the god repined, to think the fool no better wish could find. But the brave king departed from the place with smiles of gladness sparkling in his face, nor could contain, but as he took his way, impatient longs to make the first essay. Down from a lowly branch a twig he drew. The twig straight glittered with a golden hue. He takes a stone. The stone was turned to gold. A clod he touches, and the crumbling mold acknowledge soon the great transforming power. In weight and substance like a mass of ore. He plucked the corn, and straight his grasp appears filled with a bending tuft of golden ears. An apple next he takes, and seems to hold the bright Hesperian vegetable gold. His hand he careless on a pillar lays, with shining gold the fluted pillars blaze, and while he washes as the servants pour, his touch converts the stream to Danae's shower. To see these miracles so finely wrought fires with transporting joy his giddy thought. The ready slaves prepare a sumptuous board, spread with rich dainties for their happy lord, whose powerful hands the bread no sooner hold, but its whole substance is transformed to gold. Up to his mouth he lifts the savory meat, which turns to gold. His patron's noble juice of purple hue, touched by his lips, in a gilded cordial grew. Unfit for drink, and wondrous to behold, it trickles from his jaws of fluid gold. The rich poor fool, confounded with surprise, starving in all his various plenty lies, sick of his wish, he now detests the power, for which he asked so earnestly before. Amidst his gold with pinching famine cursed, and justly tortured with an equal thirst. At last, his shining arms to heaven he rears, and in distress for refuge flies to prayers. "O Father Bacchus, I have sinned," he cried, "and foolishly thy gracious gift applied. Thy pity now repenting, I implore. Oh, may I feel the golden plague no more." The hungry wretch, his folly thus confessed, touched the kind deity's good-natured breast. The gentle god annulled his first decree, and from the cruel compact set him free. But then, to cleanse him quite from further harm, and to dilute the relics of the charm, he bids him seek the stream that cuts the land nigh where the towers of Lydian Sardis stand. Then trace the river to the fountainhead, and meet it rising from its rocky bed. There, as the bubbling tide pours forth amain, to plunge his body in and wash away the stain. The king instructed to the fount retires, but with the golden charm the steam inspires, and while this quality the man forsakes, an equal power the limpid water takes, informs with veins of gold the neighbouring land, and glides along a bed of golden sand. Now loathing wealth, the occasion of his woes, far in the woods he sought a calm repose, in caves and grottos where the nymphs resort, and keep with golden Pan their sylvan court. Ah, had he left his stupid soul behind, but his condition altered not his mind. For where high Tmolus rears his shady brow, and from his cliffs surveys the seas below, in his descent by Sardis bounded here, by the small confines of Hypapa there, Pan to the nymphs his frolic ditties played, tuning his reeds beneath the checkered shade. The nymphs are pleased. The boasting sylvan plays, and speaks with sleight of great Apollo's lays. Timulus was arbiter. The boaster still accepts the trial with unequal skill. The venerable judge was seated high on his own hill that seemed to touch the sky. Above the whispering trees his head he rears, from their encumbering boughs, to free his ears. A wreath of oak alone his temples bound. The pendant acorns loosely dangled round. "In me your judge," says he, "there's no delay." Then bids the goatherd god begin and play. Pan tuned the pipe, and with his rural song pleased the low taste of all the vulgar throng. Such songs of vulgar judgment mostly please. Midas was there, and Midas judged with these. The mountain's sire with grave deportment now to Phoebus turns his venerable brow, and as he turns with him the listening wood in the same posture of attention stood. The god, his own Parnassian laurel crowned, and in a wreath his golden tresses bound. Graceful, his purple mantle swept the ground. High on the left, his ivory lute he raised. The lute, embossed with the glittering jewels, blazed. In his right hand he held the quill. His easy posture spoke a master's skill. The strings he touched with more than human art, which pleased the judge's ears and soothed his heart, who soon judiciously the palm decreed, and to the lute postponed the squeaking reed. All with applause the rightful sentence heard. Midas alone dissatisfied appeared. To him unjustly given the judgment seems, for Pan's barbaric notes he most esteems. The lyric god, who thought his untuned ear deserved but ill a human form to wear, of that deprives him, and supplies the place with some more fit and of an ampler space. Fixed on his noddle, an unseemly pair, flagging and large, and full of whitish hair. Without a total change from what he was, still in the man preserves the simple ass. He, to conceal the scandal of the deed, a purple turban folds about his head, veils the reproach from public view, and fears the laughing world would spy his monstrous ears. One trusty barber slave that used to dress his master's hair, when lengthened to excess, the mighty secret knew, but knew alone, and though impatient durst not make it known. Restless at last, a private place he found, then dug a hole, and told it to the ground. In a low whisper he revealed the case, and covered in the earth, and silent left the place. In time of trembling reeds, a plenteous crop from the confided furrow sprouted up, which, high advancing with the ripening year, made known the tiller, and his fruitless care. For then the rustling blades and whispering wind to the important secret both combined. The building of Troy. Phoebus, with full revenge from Timolus flies, darts through the air and cleaves the liquid skies. Near Hellespont he lights and treads the plains, where great Laomedon, sole monarch, reigns. Where, built between the two projecting strands, to Panomphian Jove an altar stands. Here first aspiring thoughts the king employ, to found the lofty towers of future Troy. The work, from schemes magnificent begun, at vast expense was slowly carried on, which Phoebus, seeing with the trident god, who rules the swelling surges with his nod, assuming each a mortal shape, combined at a set price to finish his design. The work was built, the king their prices denies, and his injustice backs with perjuries. This Neptune could not brook, but drove the main a mighty deluge over the Phrygian plain. 'Twas all a sea, the waters of the deep from every vale the copious harvest sweep. The briny billows overflow with soil, ravage the fields, and mock the ploughman's toil. Nor this appeased the god's revengeful mind, for still a greater plague remains behind. A huge sea monster lodges on the sands, and the king's daughter for his prey demands. To him that saved the damsel was decreed a set of horses of the sun's fine breed. But when Alcides from the rock untied the trembling fair, the ransom was denied. He, in revenge, the new-built walls attacked, and twice perjured city bravely sacked. Telamon aided, and injustice shared part of the plunder as his due reward. The princess rescued late with all her charms, Hesione was yielded to his arms. For Peleus, with a goddess bride, was more proud of his spouse than of his birth before. Grandsons to Jove there might be more than one, but in the goddess had enjoyed alone. The story of Thetis and Peleus. For Proteus thus to virgin Thetis said, "Fair goddess of the waves, consent to wed, and take some sprightly lover to your bed. A son you'll have, the terror of the field, to whom in fame and power his sire shall yield." Jove, who adored the nymph with boundless love, did from his breast the dangerous flame remove. He knew the fates, nor cared to raise up one whose fame and greatness should eclipse his own. On happy Peleus he bestowed her charms, and blessed his grandson in the goddess's arms. A silent creek Thessalia's coast can show. 2 arms project and shape it like a bow. 'Twould make a bay, but the transparent tide does scarce the yellow gravelled bottom hide. For the quick eye may through the liquid wave a firm, unweedy level beach perceive. A grove of fragrant myrtle near it grows, whose boughs, though thick, a beauteous grot disclose. The well-wrought fabric to discerning eyes rather by art than nature seems to rise. A bridal dolphin oft fair Thetis borne, to this her loved retreat, her favourite shore. Here Peleus seized her, slumbering while she lay, and urged his suit with all that love could say. But when he found her obstinately coy, resolved to force her, and command the joy, the nymph, overpowered, to art for succour flies, and various shapes the eager youth surprise. A bird she seems, but plies her wings in vain. His hands the fleeting substance still detain. A branchy tree high in the air she grew, about its bark his nimble arms he threw. A tiger neck she glares with flaming eyes. The frightened lover quits his hold and flies. The sea gods he with sacred rites adores, then a libation on the ocean pours, while the fat entrails crackle in the fire, and sheets of smoke and sweet perfume aspire. Till Proteus, rising from his oozy bed, thus to the poor despondent lover said, "No more in anxious thoughts your mind employ, for yet you shall possess the dear expected joy. You must once more the unwary nymph surprise, as in her cooling grot she slumbering lies. Then bind her fast with unrelenting hands, and strain her tender limbs with knotted bands. Still hold her under every different shape, till tired she tries no longer to escape." Thus he then sunk beneath the glassy flood, and broken accents fluttered where he stood. Bright Soul had almost now his journey done, and down the steepy western convex run, when the fair Nereid left the briny wave, and as she used, retreat to her cave. He scarce had bound her fast, when she arose, and into various shapes her body throws. She went to move her arms, and found them tied. Then, with a sigh, some god assist ye, cried, and in her proper shape stood blushing by his side. About her waist his longing arms he flung, from which embrace the great Achilles sprung. The transformation of Daedalian. Peleus, unmixed felicity enjoyed, blessed in a valiant son and virtuous bride, till fortune did in blood his hands imbrue, and his own brother by cursed chance he slew. Then, driven from Thessaly, his native clime, Trachenia first gave shelter to his crime, where peaceful sex mildly filled the throne, and like his sire the morning planet shone. But now, unlike himself, bedewed with tears, mourning a brother lost, his brow appears. First to the town with travel spent and care, Peleus and his small company repair. His herds and flocks the while at leisure feed on the rich pasture of a neighbouring mead. The prince, before the royal presence brought, showed by the suppliant olive oil what he sought, then tells his name and race and country right, but hides the unhappy reason of his flight. He begs the king some little town to give, where they may safe his faithful vassals live. Ceyx replied, "To all my bounty flows a hospitable realm your suit has chose. Your glorious race, and far resounding fame, and grandsire Jove peculiar favours claim. All you can wish I grant, entreaties spare. My kingdom, would 'twere worth the sharing, share." Tears stopped his speech. Astonished Peleus pleads to know the cause from whence his grief proceeds. The prince replied, There's none of ye but deems this hawk was ever such as now it seems. No, 'twas a hero once, Dedalian named, for warlike deeds and haughty valour famed, like me to that bright luminary born, who wakes aurora and brings on the morn. His fierceness still remains and love of blood, now dread of birds and tyrant of the wood. My make was softer, peace my greatest care, but this my brother wholly bent on war. Late nations feared and routed armies fled, that force which now the timorous pigeons dread. A daughter he possessed divinely fair, and scarcely yet had seen her 15th year. Young Chione. 1,000 rivals strove to win the maid and teach her how to love. Phoebus and Mercury by chance one day from Delphi and Selene passed this way. Together they the virgin saw. Desire at once warmed both their breasts with amorous fire. Phoebus resolved to wait till close of day, but Mercury's hot love brooked no delay. With his entrancing rod the maid he charms, and unresisted revels in her arms. 'Twas night, and Phoebus in a beldame's dress to the late rifled beauty got access. Her time complete 9 circling moons had run. To either god she bore a lovely son. To Mercury Autolycus she brought, who turned to thefts and tricks his subtle thought. Possessed he was of all his father's sleight, at will made white look black and black look white. Philemon, born to Phoebus like his sire, the Muses loved, and finely struck the lyre, and made his voice and touch in harmony conspire. In vain, fond maid, you boast this double birth, the love of gods and royal fathers' worth, and Jove among your ancestors rehearse. Could blessings such as these e'er prove a curse? To her they did, who with audacious pride, vain of her own, Diana's charms decried. Her taunts the goddess with resentment fill. My face you like not, you shall try my skill, she said, and straight her vengeful bow she strung, and sent a shaft that pierced her guilty tongue. The bleeding tongue in vain its accents tries. In the red stream her soul reluctant flies. With sorrow wild I ran to her relief, and tried to moderate my brother's grief. He, deaf as rocks by stormy surges beat, loudly laments and hears me not entreat. When on the funeral pile he saw her laid, thrice he to rush into the flames essayed. Thrice with officious care by us was stayed. Now, mad with grief, away he fled amain. Like a stung heifer that resents the pain, and bellowing wildly bounds along the plain. O'er the most rugged ways so fast he ran, he seemed a bird already, not a man. He left us breathless all behind, and now, in quest of death, had gained Parnassus's brow. But when from thence headlong himself he threw, he fell not, but with airy pinions flew. Phoebus, in pity, changed him to a fowl, whose crooked beak and claws the birds control. Little of bulk, but of a warlike soul, a hawk become, the feathered race's foe. He tries to case his own by others' woe. A wolf turned into marble. While they astonished heard the king relate these wonders of his hapless brother's fate, the prince's herdsman at the court arrives, and fresh surprise to all the audience gives. "Oh, Peleus, Peleus, dreadful news I bear," he said, and trembled as he spoke for fear. The worst affrighted Peleus bid tell him, while Ceyx too grew pale with friendly zeal. Thus he began. When soul mid-heaven had gained, and half his way was past and half remained, I to the level shore my cattle drove, and let them freely in the meadows rove. Some stretched at length admire the watery plain, some cropped the herb, some wanton swam the main. A temple stands of antique make hard by, where no gilt domes nor marble lure the eye. Unpolished rafters bear its lowly height, hid by grove as ancient from the sight. Here Nereus and the Nereids they adore. I heard it from the man who thither bore his net to dry it on the sunny shore. Adjoins a lake, enclosed with willows round, where swelling waves have overflowed the mound, and muddy, stagnate on the lower ground. From thence a rustling noise, increasing flies, strikes the still shore, and frights us with surprise. Straight a huge wolf rushed from the marshy wood, his jaws besmeared with mingled foam and blood. Though equally by hunger urged and rage, his appetite he minds not to assuage. Not that he meets his rabid fury spares, but the whole herd with mad disorder tears. Some of our men who strove to drive him thence, torn by his teeth, have died in their defence. The echoing lakes, the sea and fields and shore, empurpled blush with streams of reeking gore. Delay is lost, nor have we time for thought. While yet some few remain alive, we ought to seize our arms with Confederate force, try, if we so can, stop his bloody course. But Peleus cared not for his ruined herd. His crime he called to mind, and thence inferred that Samoth's revenge this havoc made, in sacrifice to murdered Phocus's shade. The king commands his servants to their arms, resolved to go, but the loud noise alarms his lovely queen, who from her chamber flew, and her half-plaited hair behind her threw. About his neck she hung with loving fears, and now with words and now with pleading tears, entreated that he'd send his men alone, and stay himself to save 2 lives in one. Then Peleus, your just fears, O queen, forget. Too much the offer leaves me in your debt. No arms against the monster I shall bear, but the sea nymphs appease with humble prayer. The citadel's high turrets pierce the sky, which homebound vessels glad from far descry. This they ascend, and thence, with sorrow ken, the mangled heifers lie, and bleeding men. The inexorable ravager they view with blood discolored, still the rest pursue. There Peleus prayed submissive towards the sea, and deprecates the ire of injured Samothrace. But deaf to all his prayers the nymph remained, till Thetis for her spouse the boon obtained. Pleased with the luxury, the furious beast, unstopped, continues still his bloody feast. While yet upon a sturdy bull he flew, changed by the nymph, a marble block he grew. No longer dreadful now, the wolf appears buried in stone, and vanished like their fears. Yet still the fates unhappy Peleus vexed, to the Magnesian shore he wanders next. Acastus there, who ruled the peaceful clime, grants his request, and expiates his crime. The story of sex and Alcyone. These prodigies affect the pious prince, but more perplexed with those that happened since. He purposes to seek the clarion god, avoiding Delphi, his more famed abode, since Phlegian robbers made unsafe the road. Yet could he not from her he loved so well the fatal voyage he resolved conceal, and when she saw her lord prepare to part, a deadly cold ran shivering to her heart. Her faded cheeks are changed to boxen hue, and in her eyes the tears are ever new. She thrice essayed to speak, her accents hung, and faltering died unfinished on her tongue, and vanished into sighs, and with long delay her voice returned, and found the wonted way. Tell me, my lord, she said, what fault unknown thy once beloved Alcyone has done? Whither, whither is thy kindness gone? Can sex, then, sustain to leave his wife, and unconcerned forsake the sweets of life? What can thy mind to this long journey move, or needest thou absence to renew thy love? Yet, if thou goest by land, though grief possess my soul, even then my fear will be the less. But be warned to shun the watery way. The face is frightful of the stormy sea, for late I saw drift disjointed planks, and empty tombs erected on the banks. Nor let false hopes to trust betray thy mind, because my sire in caves constrains the wind, can with a breath their clamorous rage appease. They fear his whistle, and forsake the seas. Not so for once indulge, they sweep the main, deaf to the call or hearing, hear in vain, but bent on mischief bear the waves before, and not content with seas insult the shore, when ocean, air, and earth at once engage, and rooted forests fly before their rage. At once the clashing clouds to battle move, and lightnings run across the fields above. I know them well, and mark their rude comport, yet a child within my father's court. In times of tempest they command alone, and he but sits precarious on the throne. The more I know, the more my fears augment, and fears are oft prophetic of the event. But if not fears or reasons will prevail, if fate has fixed the obstinate to sail, go not without thy wife, but let me bear my part of danger with an equal share, and present what I suffer only fear. Then o'er the bounding billows shall we fly, secure to live or to die. These reasons moved her warlike husband's heart, but still he held his purpose to depart, for as he loved her equal to his life, he would not to the seas expose his wife, nor could he wrought his voyage to refrain, but sought by arguments to soothe her pain. Nor these availed. At length he lights on one, with which so difficult a cause he won. My love, so short an absence cease to fear, for by my father's holy flame I swear, before 2 moons their orb with light adorn, if heaven allowed me life, I will return. This promise of so short a stay prevails. He soon equips the ship, supplies the sails, and gives the word to launch. She, trembling, views this pomp of death, and parting tears renews. Last, with a kiss, she took a long farewell, sighed with a sad presage, and swooning fell. While sex seeks delays, the lusty crew raised on their banks, their oars in order drew. To their broad breasts the ship with fury flew. The queen recovered, rears her humid eyes, and first her husband on the poop espies. Shaking his hand at distance on the main, she took the sign and shook her hand again. Still, as the ground recedes, contracts her view with sharpened sight, till she no longer knew the much-loved face. That comfort loss supplies with less, and with the galley feeds her eyes. The galley borne from view by rising gales, she followed with her sight the flying sails. When even the flying sails were seen no more, forsaken of all sight, she left the shore. Then on her bridal bed her body throws, and sought in sleep her wearied eyes to close. Her husband's pillow, and the widowed part which once he pressed, renewed the former smart. And now a breeze from shore began to blow. The sailors shipped their oars and ceased to row. Then hoist their yards a trip, and all their sails let fall, to court the wind and catch the gales. By this the vessel half her course had run. Both shores were lost to sight, when at the close of day a stiffer gale at east arose. The sea grew white, the rowling waves from far, like heralds first denounced the watery war. This seen, the master soon began to cry, "Strike! Strike the topsail! Let the main-sheet fly, and furl your sails! The winds repel the sound!" And in the speaker's mouth the speech is drowned. Yet of their own accord, as danger taught, each in his way officiously they wrought. Some stow their oars or stop the leaky sides, another bolder yet the yard bestrides, and folds the sails, a fourth with labour laves the intruding seas, and waves ejects on waves. In this confusion, while their work they ply, the winds augment the winter of the sky, and wage intestine wars. The suffering seas are tossed and mingled, as their tyrants please. The master would command, but in despair of safety stands amazed with stupid care. Nor what to bid or what forbid he knows. The ungoverned tempest to such fury grows. Vain is his force, and vainer is his skill. With such a concourse comes the flood of ill. The cries of men are mixed with rattling shrouds. Seas dash on seas, and clouds encounter clouds. And once from east to west, from pole to pole, the forky lightnings flash. the roaring thunders roll. Now waves on waves ascending scale the skies, and in the fires above the water fries. When yellow sands are sifted from below, the glittering billows give a golden show. And when the fouler bottom spews the black, the Stygian dye the tainted waters take. Then frothy white appear the flatted seas, and change their colour, changing their disease. Like various fits the Tracan vessel finds, and now sublime she rides upon the winds, as from a lofty summit looks from high, and from the clouds beholds the nether sky. Now from the depth of hell they lift their sight, and at a distance see superior light. The lashing billows make a loud report, and beat her sides as battering rams a fort, or as a lion bounding in his way, with force augmented, bears against his prey. Sidelong to seize, or unappalled with fear, springs on the toils and rushes on the spear. So seas impelled by winds, with added power, assault the sides, and o'er the hatches tower. The planks, their pitchy covering washed away, now yield and now a yawning breach display. The roaring waters with a hostile tide rush through the ruins of her gaping side. Meantime, in sheets of rain the sky descends, and ocean swelled with waters upwards tends. One rising, falling one, the heavens and sea meet at their confines in the middle way. The sails are drunk with showers and drop with rain. Sweet waters mingle with the briny main. No star appears to lend his friendly light. Darkness and tempest make a double night. But flashing fires disclose the deep by turns, and while the lightnings blaze, the water burns. Now all the waves their scattered force unite, and as a soldier foremost in the fight makes way for others, and an host alone still presses on, and urging gains the town. So, while the invading billows come abreast, the hero 10th, advanced before the rest, sweeps all before him with impetuous sway, and from the walls descends upon the prey. Part following enter, part remain without, with envy hear their fellows' conquering shout, and mount on others' back, in hopes to share the city, thus become the seat of war. An universal cry resounds aloud. The sailors run in heaps, a helpless crowd. Art fails and courage falls, no succour near. As many waves, as many deaths appear. One weeps, and yet despairs of late relief. One cannot weep, his fears congeal his grief, but stupid with dry eyes expects his fate. One with loud shrieks laments his lost estate, and calls those happy whom their funerals wait. This wretch with prayers and vows the gods implores, and even the skies he cannot see adores. That other on his friends his thoughts bestows, his careful father and his faithful spouse. The covetous worldling in his anxious mind thinks only on the wealth he left behind. All sex his Alcyone employs, for her he grieves, yet in her absence joys. His wife he wishes, and would still be near, not with him, but wishes him with her. Now, with last looks he seeks his native shore, which fate has destined him to see no more. He sought, but in the dark, tempestuous night, he knew not whether to direct his sight. So whirl the seas, such darkness blinds the sky, that the black night receives a deeper dye. The giddy ship ran round, the tempest tore her mast, and overboard the rudder bore. One below mounts with a scornful brow, proud of her conquest gained, insults the waves below, nor lighter falls than if some giant tore Pindus and Athos with the freight they bore. And tossed on seas, pressed with ponderous blow, down sinks the ship within the abyss below. Down with the vessel sink into the main, the many never more to rise again. Some few on scattered planks with fruitless care lay hold and swim. But while they swim, despair. Even he who late a sceptre did command now grasps a floating fragment in his hand, and while he struggles on the stormy main, invokes his father and his wife's in vain. But yet his consort is his greatest care, Alcyone he names amidst his prayer, names as a charm against the waves and wind, most in his mouth and ever in his mind. Tired with his toil, all hopes of safety past, from prayers to wishes he descends at last, that his dead body, wafted to the sands, might have its burial from her friendly hands. As oft as he can catch a gulp of air and peep above the seas, he names the fair, and even when plunged beneath, on her he raves, murmuring Alcyone below the waves. At last a falling billow stops his breath, breaks o'er his head, and whelms him underneath. That night his heavenly form obscured with tears, and since he was forbid to leave the skies, he muffled with a cloud his mournful eyes. Meantime, Alcyone, his fate unknown, computes how many nights he has been gone, observes the waning moon with hourly view, numbers her age, and wishes for a new. Against the promised time provides with care, and hastens in the woof the robes he was to wear, and for herself employs another loom, new dressed to meet her lord returning home. Flattering her heart with joys that never were to come, she fumed the temples with an odorous flame, and oft before the sacred altars came to pray for him, who was an empty name. All powers implored, but far from the rest, to Juno she her pious vows addressed. Her much-loved lord from perils to protect, and safe overseas his voyage to direct, then prayed that she might still possess in his heart, and no pretending rival share a part. This last petition heard of all her prayer, the rest, dispersed by winds, were lost in air. But she, the goddess of the nuptial bed, tired with her vain devotions for the dead, resolved the tainted hand should be repelled, with incense offered, and her altar held. Then Iris thus spoke: "Thou faithful maid, by whom thy queen's commands are well conveyed, haste to the house of sleep, and bid the god who rules the night by visions with a nod prepare a dream in figure and in form resembling him who perished in the storm. This form before Alcyone present, to make her certain of the sad event. Endued with robes of various hue she flies, and flying draws an arch, a segment of the skies, then leaves her bending bow, and from the steep descends to search the silent house of sleep." The house of sleep. Near the Cimmerians, in his dark abode, deep in a cavern, dwells the drowsy god, whose gloomy mansion nor the rising sun nor setting visits, nor the lightsome noon, but lazy vapors round the region fly, perpetual twilight and a doubtful sky. No cocking crow does there his wings display, nor with his horny bill provoke the day, nor watchful dogs, nor the more wakeful geese, disturb with nightly noise the sacred peace, nor beast of nature, nor the tame or nigh, nor trees with tempest rock, nor human cry, but safe repose without an air of breath dwells here, and a dumb quiet next to death. An arm of Lethe, with a gentle flow arising upwards from the rock below, the palace moats, and o'er the pebbles creeps, and with soft murmurs calls the coming sleeps. Around its entry nodding poppies grow, and all cool simples that sweet rest bestow. Night from the plants their sleepy virtue drains, and passing sheds it on the silent plains. No door there was the unguarded house to keep, on creaking hinges turned to break a sleep. But in the gloomy court was raised a bed, stuffed with black plumes, and on an ebon stead, black was the covering too, where lay the god, and slept supine, his limbs displayed abroad. About his head fantastic visions fly, which various images of things supply, and mock their forms the leaves on trees not more, nor bearded ears in fields, nor sands upon the shore. The virgin entering bright indulged the day, to the brown cave and brushed the dreams away. The god, disturbed with this new glare of light, cast sudden on his face, unsealed his sight, and raised his tardy head, which sunk again, and sinking on his bosom, knocked his chin. A length shook off himself, and asked the dame, and asked, yawning, for what intent she came. To whom the goddess thus, O sacred rest, sweet pleasing sleep, of all the powers the best, O peace of mind, repairer of decay, whose balms renew the limbs to labours of the day, care shuns thy soft approach, and sullen flies away. Adorn a dream, expressing human form, the shape of him who suffered in the storm, and send it flitting to the Trajan court, the wreck of wretched sex to report. Before his queen bid the pale spectre stand, who begs a vain relief at Juno's hand. She said, and scarce awake her eyes could keep, unable to support the fumes of sleep, but fled, returning by the way she went, and swerved along her bow with swift ascent. The god, uneasy till he slept again, resolved at once to rid himself of pain, and though against his custom called aloud, exciting Morpheus from the sleepy crowd. Morpheus, of all his numerous train, expressed the shape of man and imitated best. The walk, the words, the gesture could supply, the habit mimic, and the main belie. Plays well, but all his action is confined, extending not beyond our humankind. Another, birds and beasts and dragons, apes, and dreadful images and monster shapes. This demon, Isolus, in heaven high fall, the gods have named, but men Phobator call. A third is Phantasus, whose actions roll on meaner thoughts, and things devoid of soul. Earth, fruits, and flowers he represents in dreams, and solid rocks unmoved, and running streams. These three to kings and chiefs their scenes display, the rest before the ignoble commons play. Of these the chosen Morpheus is dispatched, which done, the lazy monarch, overwatched, down from his propping elbow drops his head, dissolved in sleep, and shrinks within his bed. Darkling the demon glides, for flight prepared, so soft that scarce his fanning wings are heard. To Trajan, swift as thought, the flitting shade through air his momentary journey made, then lays aside the steerage of his wings, forsakes his proper form, assumes the king's, and pale as death, despoiled of his array, into the queen's apartment takes his way, and stands before the bed at dawn of day, unmoved his eyes, and wet his beard appears, and shedding vain but seeming real tears, the briny waters dropping from his hairs, then staring on her with a ghastly look and hollow voice. He thus the queen bespoke. Knowest thou not me, not yet, unhappy wife? Or are my features perished with my life? Look once again, and for thy husband lost, lo, all that's left of him, thy husband's ghost. Thy vows for my return were all in vain. The stormy south o'ertook us in the main, and never shalt thou see thy living lord again. Bear witness, heaven, I called on thee in death, and while I called, a billow stopped my breath. Think not that flying fame reports my fate. I present, I appear, and my own wreck relate. Rise, wretched widow, rise, nor undeplored permit my soul to pass the Stygian ford, but rise, prepared in black, to mourn thy perished lord. Thus said the player god, and adding art of voice and gesture, so performed his part. She thought, so like her love the shade appears, that sex spake the words, and sex shed the tears. She groaned, her inward soul with grief oppressed. She sighed, she wept, and sleeping beat her breast, then stretched her arms to embrace his body bare, her clasping arms enclose but empty air. At this, not yet awake, she cried, Oh, stay, one is our fate, and common is our way. So dreadful was the dream, so loud she spoke, that starting sudden up, the slumber broke. Then cast her eyes around in hope to view her vanished lord, and find the vision true. For now the maids who waited her commands ran in with lighted tapers in their hands, Tired with the search, not finding what she seeks, with cruel blows she pounds her blubbered cheeks. Then from her beaten breast the linen tear, and cut the golden caul that bound her hair. Her nurse demands the cause with louder cries. She prosecutes her griefs, and thus replies, "No more Algernon, she suffered death with her loved lord, when sex lost his breath. No flattery, no false comfort give me now. My shipwrecked sex is forever gone. I saw him manifest in view. His voice, his figure, and his gestures new. His lustre lost, and every living grace, yet I retain the features of his face, though with pale cheeks, wet beard, and dropping hair. None but my sex could appear so fair. I would have strained him with a strict embrace, but through my arms he slipped and vanished from the place. There, even just there, he stood. And as she spoke, where the last spectre was, she cast her look. Fain she would hope, and gazed upon the ground, if any printed footsteps might be found. Then sighed and said, "This I too well foreknew, and my prophetic fears presaged too true. 'Twas what I begged. With a bleeding heart I took my leave, and suffered thee to part. Oh, were I to go along, or thou to stay, never to divide our way. Happier for me that all our hours assigned together we had lived, even not in death disjoined. So had my sex still been living here, or with my sex I perished there. Now I die absent in the vast profound, and me without myself the seas have drowned. The storms were not so cruel, should I strive to lengthen life, and such as grief survive. And neither will I strive, nor wretched thee in death forsake, but keep thee company. If not one common sepulchre contains our bodies, or one urn our last remains, yet sex and Alcyone shall join, their names remembered in one common line." No farther voice her mighty grief affords, for sighs come rushing in betwixt her words, and stopped her tongue. But what her tongue denied, soft tears and groans and dumb complaints supplied. 'Twas morning to the port, she takes her way, and stands upon the margin of the sea. That place, that very spot of ground she sought, or thither by her destiny was brought, where last he stood, and while sadly she said, "'Twas here he left me," lingering here delayed his parting kiss, and there his anchors weighed. Thus speaking, while her thoughts past actions trace, and called to mind admonished by the place, sharp at her utmost ken she cast her eyes, and somewhat floating from afar descries, "It seems a corpse adrift, to distant sight, but at a distance who could judge aright?" It wafted nearer yet, and then she knew that what before she but surmised was true. A corpse it was, but whose it was, unknown. Yet moved, however, she made the cause her own, took the bad omen of a shipwrecked man, as for a stranger wept, and thus began. "Poor wretch, on stormy seas to lose thy life! Unhappy thou, but more thy widowed wife." At this she paused, for now the flowing tide had brought her body nearer to the side. The more she looks, the more her fears increase. At nearer sight, and she's herself the less, now driven ashore, and at her feet it lies. She knows too much in knowing whom she sees. Her husband's corpse. At this she loudly shrieks, "'Tis he! 'Tis he!" she cries, and tears her cheeks, her hair and vest, and stooping to the sands about his neck, she cast her trembling hands. "And it is thus, O dearer than my life, thus, returnest thou to thy longing wife," she said, and to the neighboring mole she strode, raised there to break the incursions of the flood. Headlong from hence to plunge herself she springs, but shoots along, supported on her wings. a bird new made. About the banks she plies, not far from shore, and short excursion tries, nor seeks in air her humble flight to rise. Content to skim the surface of the seas, her bill, though slender, sends a creaking noise, and imitates a lamentable voice. Now, lighting where the bloodless body lies, she with a funeral note renews her cries. At all her stretch her little wings she spread, and with her feathered arms embraced the dead. Then, flickering to his pallid lips, she strove to print a kiss, the last essay of love. Whether the vital touch revived the dead, or that the moving waters raised his head to meet the kiss, the vulgar doubt alone. For sure a present miracle was shown. The gods their shapes to winter birds translate, but both obnoxious to their former fate. Their conjugal affection still is tied, and still the mournful race is multiplied. They bill, they tread. Alcyone, compressed 7 days, sits brooding on her floating nest. A wintry queen, her sire at length is kind, calms every storm and hushes every wind, prepares his empire for his daughter's ease, and for his hatching nephews smooths the seas. A Sacus transformed into a cormorant. These some old man sees wanton in the air, and praises the unhappy constant pair. Then to his friend the long-necked cormorant shows, the former tale reviving others' woes. That sable bird, he cries, which cuts the flood with slender legs, was once of royal blood. His ancestors from mighty Tros proceed, the brave Laomedon and Ganymede, whose beauty tempted Jove to steal the boy, and Priam, hapless prince, who fell with Troy. Himself was Hector's brothers, and had fate but given this hopeful youth a longer date, perhaps had rivalled warlike Hector's worth. Though on the mother's side of meaner birth, fair Alexthoe, a country maid, bare Aesacus by stealth in Ida's shade. He fled the noisy town and pompous court, loved the lone hills and simple rural sport, and seldom to the sea would resort. Yet he no rustic clownishness professed, nor was soft love a stranger to his breast. The youth had long the nymph Hespere wooed, oft through the thicket or the mead pursued. Her haply on her father's bank he spied, while fearless she had silver tresses dried. Away she fled, not stags with half such speed, before the prowling wolf scud o'er the mead, nor ducks, when they the safer flood forsake, pursued by hawks so swift regain the lake. As fast he followed in the hot career, desire, the lover winged, the virgin fear. A snake unseen now pierced her heedless foot. Quick through the veins the venom juices shoot. She fell, and 'scaped by death his fierce pursuit. Her lifeless body frighted, he embraced and cried, "Not this I dreaded, but thy haste. Oh, had my love been less, or less thy fear! The victory thus bought is far too near. Accursed snake, yet I more cursed than he. He gave the wound, the cause was given by me. Yet none shall say that unrevenged you died." He spoke, then climbed a cliff or hanging side, and resolute leaped on the foaming tide. Tethys received him gently on the wave. The death he sought denied, and feathers gave. Debarred the surest remedy of grief, and forced to live, he cursed the unasked relief. Then on his airy pinions upward flies, and on a second fold successless tries. The downy plume a quick descent denies. Enraged, he often dives beneath the wave, and there in vain expects to find a grave. His ceaseless sorrow for the unhappy maid meagred his look, and on his spirits preyed. Still, near the sounding deep he lives, his name from frequent diving and emerging came.